welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Welcome to another episode of Up Close with Carlos Sang. My next guest has currently returned to the Almeida Theatre to star in their production of Cold War. He is an Olivier Award-winning actor who has performed in shows such as Cabaret, Snowflake, Three Sisters, just to name a few, and has also appeared on screen in productions of The Queen, Murder on the Orient Express, and Philomena. It's a huge privilege to be able to introduce Elliot Levey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. What a delight.
So you previously worked at the Almeida Theatre on their productions of Three Sisters and also worked with Luc Fallon on 9 Lessons and Carols. What was it that made you want to come back to the Almeida to work on Cold War?
Well, it's I live around the corner. I can get home in 10 minutes, which is about the main thing. I'm only partly joking. I love the Almeida. I live round the corner, and theatres rise and fall with fashion, but the Almeida is in a sort of golden age, isn't it? I mean, it's just had the most remarkable 10 years, and it's just become the sort of benchmark of excellence, I think. It's just got a sort of house style and a team that's kind of excellent and remarkable, and their literary department is really smart and really tasteful and daring. And so, if you're going to work there on new material, it's going to be exciting, and that makes it worthwhile. I mean, we can all do vanilla projects and do safe things if we're lucky enough. But this one especially just struck me as a real proper gamble. If you got Rupert Goold and Conor McPherson and Simon Hale and Elvis Costello in the room, I mean, you're going to take the gamble, aren't you? You're going to take that risk. Whatever happens, there's going to be something. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Almeida is such a terrific producing house in London. I've always been so impressed by the work that they've put on, whether it be something like Tammy Faye or Streetcar Named Desire. A Mirror, I know, is transferring later next year as well. What was it about this script which really drew you in as an actor?
Well, I mean, the truth is, about a year ago, I was doing a show in the West End, and Rupert gave us a call because they'd all had this idea about adapting this Pawlikowski film, Cold War. And a few of us got together in a rehearsal room just to knock about some initial ideas. So we workshopped it. We had the great Simon Hale, who is, as you'll know, he's the orchestrator. He's the guy that worked with Conor McPherson on Girl from the North Country, and he's a kind of genius arranger. And so we had him in the room, and we were just knocking about some of the songs. And Elvis Costello he'd fallen in love with the film during lockdown, I think, for various reasons. And I think just those minds came together and thought, let's see if there's something in this film. Let's see if we can adapt it. And Conor had some great ideas. So when we first looked at it, we almost had a sort of, it was almost taking the bare bones of the film script and running it through the Conor McPherson wash. So some of him, rubbed off on it. And I think we were all surprised after a week at just how kind of stagey it could be. The film, I don't know if you've seen it, but the film is kind of remarkably filmic in the sense that it's lots of beautiful camera work and it's lots of psychology. By that I mean there are just lots of languorous shots lingering into the eyes of its two protagonists, and so much is unsaid. And of course theatre can do that to a certain extent, but ultimately it's a different art form, and we were experimenting with just how little we needed to do, and then how exciting it was for Conor to start tickling away at some of the stuff which you don't see in a film, tickling away at some of the wider world, creating a context for these lovers to exist in, giving them jeopardy, giving them obstacles, creating drama where a lot of the drama in the film is implicit. I suppose in theatre we have to be a little more explicit. So yeah, so a year ago we started workshopping it and just trying to work out where music and action can marry. And we were trying to work out, you know, is this going to be a musical? Is it a play with music? Is it somewhere in between? And I'm not sure we've still worked that out. I mean, you've seen the show. There are moments where you think, oh, look, we're in a musical world now. This is the language of musicals. People suddenly start singing because, well, it's the obvious thing emotionally for them to do. Mm-hmm. And then scenes will pass without any music at all. So it's, I think we are continually probing and playing with the idea of when music feels natural and when the music dies, I suppose, to be sort of crude about it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, the mise en scene in Pawlikowski's original film is so extraordinary, and it's so right that the film, you know, won so much praise and was so heralded by critics and audiences alike. Was it daunting at all, you know, trying to translate all of that onto the stage?
I think it could have been. I mean, I don't personally find it daunting, partly because it's not. I mean, the film has its many admirers, but it's such a recent film. It hasn't sort of become a sort of iconic film. It hasn't got the status of a great old film. I mean, it feels like a great old film, and I imagine one day it will be possibly regarded as one. But I think for us in the rehearsal room, I think we felt quite free to breathe and to experiment and to push the narrative. And I don't think there was ever a sense of being daunted, because I think everybody, film producers and the theatre producers, all of us together, were striving to create a new language that was usable and would translate the film onto stage. So I mean, that I think if you're daunted, you're going to shoot yourselves in the foot immediately. It's a bit like when people do classic plays and they think, oh God, this is a perfect Chekhov. Let's not dare to do something unusual or follow our instincts. But I think invariably, if the material's good, if you follow your instincts and you're truthful, invariably you end up in the same place that the playwright intended. I mean, that's the amazing thing. You can do all sorts of things. I mean, you mentioned Three Sisters before, but it is sort of it's sort of relevant, really, because you sort of think Three Sisters, it's a near perfect play, but you kind of go, who are we to feel free to follow our instincts when something has been performed so many thousands of times so brilliantly? And it turns out, because it's great writing and it's a great piece of art, if you are free with yourself, if you treat it like it's just been written, you arrive at a really good place. I mean, if you're making crude decisions and you're making untruthful decisions, well, then the pitfalls are your own fault. But I don't know. It felt the same working on this.
Yeah, absolutely. This is your first time working with Rupert Goold as well, you know, at the Almeida. You know, what were those conversations like, you know, working with him on, you know, developing this piece and bringing his vision of this story to life?
Well, he's brilliant. I mean, Rupert Goold is a brilliant man, full stop. And, you know, we all know that he is one of the greatest theatre directors alive, which makes conversations incredibly easy, because you're dealing with somebody who is excellent. So you can just enjoy the time. I mean, you just enjoy the time that you're. And also, as an actor, truth is, when you're in a room with really brilliant people, it's a huge pleasure because I'd get into trouble with some actors here, but I mean, there is an element to our job which is to submit. And it's a wonderful feeling not handing over responsibility to higher powers, but just fully trusting somebody. When you fully trust somebody, you can really work because your barriers come down. Your trust allows you to do things, take direction, follow notes with abandon. And the difficulty sometimes is you can be in a room and maybe you don't trust somebody, or you don't trust somebody entirely, or you trust them a bit, and then compromises happen because you don't quite go there. You think maybe you should, there's confusion. But walk in a room with Rupert Goold, well, give up. You can just trust him. He's got impeccable taste. The guy is brilliant. And it's an easy life. It's an easy life working with great directors. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really terrific show, what you've been able to put together. And also, Elvis Costello, as you mentioned, his music features very prominently in the show. And music plays a very integral role in the film too. Why do you think music is so important to telling this story?
Well, I'd say, I mean, and so it's not for me to say because I'm English and not Polish. But I think there's something specifically Polish, certainly Eastern European, about the relationship that these people have living under these constraints to their national music. And so the play in part is about a mythological music, a folk music from the ancient times. This notion swirling about in the minds of what was a fledgling nation directly after the Second World War. I mean, I don't know how many of you, our listeners today, know about Polish history, but I mean, it's an astonishing history in the sense that it was right at the center of Europe during the the century of the Great Wars, and it was overrun, and it was shared around, and it had its borders changed. It had whole elements of its population cleansed. There was a time when Poland was a sort of multinational, multi-ethnic republic. And then, as many of you know, where we take up the story directly after the Second World War, it had lost millions of its inhabitants to the Nazi genocide. That was the Jewish population, which was a huge percentage, or a huge minority. A vast section of its northeastern population became Ukraine. Many people there had been Russian nationals. It's incredibly complicated. And the music in this play is about a group of people in the rubble of the Second World War, when Poland is divided by Hitler and Stalin, and the local population are equally brutalized by the Red Army and the Nazis. This new nation decides to go back to what was fundamentally Polish, and it goes, in our story, a group of academics and government appointees go through the fields and the mountains, and they go into the rural hinterland of Poland, and they record local folk music, and they gather this music, and then they create this ensemble of these peasant songs. And then, of course, as you know, in the story of our play, what happens a few years later is that the Stalinist takeover of Poland politicizes the Polish ethnic music and then turns it into a Soviet myth. So the music, to answer your question a little bit more succinctly, what we learn in this play is that music becomes a tool of the powerful. And our protagonist, Victor Zatonsky, is a man who has a musician's block. he can no longer compose. We discover, no spoilers, we discover later on in the play why he can't write original music, because of something that's happened, some trauma and guilt that's happened in his past. So all he can do is he can take some of these ancient songs and rework them. And you see the adaptability of the arranger, and you see the adaptability of the human being living under a totalitarian state. And you see that he is forever shape-shifting. He can take one of these tunes and he can turn it into jazz when he lives in Paris. He can turn it into rock and roll when that movement takes over in the 60s. He can do all sorts of things, but at its core, he retains the essential Polish folkness, the origin of the story. He can never really escape his Polishness, and I suppose the story is partly that.
Yeah, and I suppose your character as well, Kaczmarek, he plays a very important role in setting up the story, and kind of lays the foundations for what we see unfold over the course of the show. What was it that attracted you to this part too, as an actor?
I love the idea of this character. In the film too. I like these guys because, I mean, the truth is, I often get to play sort of intellectual parts, and what I love about Kaczmarek is that he's that person that we all know who is sort of anti-intellectual. He is just he's one of those winners, not too introspective. His conscience is rarely spoken to, just gets on with it, does what he has to do, kind of wins because he isn't plagued by certain bourgeois values. He's happy to be a bastard, and he's happy to play the system. And as we all know, those people are really happy because they just get on with it, and they win or they lose, and they wheel and they deal, and they make accommodations. They're they don't care. They know the world is a difficult and evil place, and they do what it takes, and they sleep well at night. I just thought, it'd be really joyful to play somebody like that who just doesn't really care and cruises through the story from 1946 through to I don't know where we end up. We end up in sort of 1963, happy-go-lucky, no problems. And when he sees an obstacle, he just sort of jumps over it. Easy peasy. What a laugh.
Yeah, it's definitely quite a departure from your other roles. And I feel like, prior to Cabaret, we didn't normally associate you with many musical shows. Were you always interested in doing, sort of musical theatre, or was it something that, fairly recently developed?
It just sort of, it happened upon me, really. I did do a musical at the Menier Chocolate Factory years ago, which I adored. It was a huge flop. It was called Take Flight. And it was a Maltby Shire and Weidman collaboration, brand new musical about Wilbur and Orville Wright, Amelia Earhart, and Lindbergh, amongst other pioneers of flight. Sounds dreadful. I think many people thought it was, but I thought it was just heaven to be in. And they are a different beast. They're a completely different beast. And I mean, look, just me calling it a flop is one of the things that marks musicals out as being an entirely different beast, because plays aren't flops. Sometimes they're not very good and they get 2 stars or something, but they're plays. But musicals, there is a sort of, it's not just the fact that musicals are a huge financial undertaking, but also expectations on musicals are different. The life of musicals, it's a different life, isn't it? And it's, I suppose, the rewards of a great musical are life-changing for everybody involved, and it's just I suppose I'm talking about something which is a more popular art form. And like plays, I mean, I just remember thinking back to Take Flight, we all thought it was kind of brilliant, and we were enjoying it and loving it and fell in love with the music, and audiences less so. And also you kind of think, oh, maybe it's just us, maybe we buggered it up, and maybe it is brilliant, we were just bad at it, but nobody will touch it because it had a go and it didn't work. And maybe somebody will be brave again in 5-10 years time and go, hang on a minute, this is brilliant, let's do this, but let's do it a different way. That'd be interesting to see. But I mean, I don't know, people, there's a level of criticism or a sharpening of the criticism when it comes to a musical. Maybe it's because there are hits and flops that people feel, and reviewers feel, they need to get it right. You know, history is full of ridiculous reviews of world-changing, world-beating musicals given terrible reviews. You know, some of the original reviews for Les Mis or whatever, you know, would make you think it's completely risible and doesn't stand a chance. And, you know, 30 years later, is it 30 years? Probably longer. You know, 40 years, I don't know. You know, the rest is history. And so it's they're fun. I definitely want to do some more musicals. I was hoping to do one very soon, but I can't talk about it, but because I now can't do it. But I was going to be doing a new musical starting soon. And they're just exciting. I think everyone's more excited about the prospect, and you know, you get sent the music, and it's so exciting. You just think, oh God, this could be the beginning of something really exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely. The first time I got to come and see you in anything was in Snowflake at the Kiln, which was sort of this ultra contemporary piece. Yeah, how did you go about, you know, crafting, you know, this character without making them seem, you know, completely unlikable?
Well, Mike Bartlett, again, it's like work with brilliant people and you don't have to do anything. You just say the words. I mean, it's Mike Bartlett. Mike Bartlett wrote this monologue originally. I think that's how it started out. And then it expanded into a two-hander, and then it expanded further into a three-hander. And we did it originally out of town. We had a go at it in Oxford somewhere, at a lovely little venue called the Old Fire Station. And it was really sweet. But I mean, essentially that opening monologue, which is the opening half of the play, which is, I don't know, it's an hour, 50 minutes. I try and do it quicker than 50 minutes because it's always quite scary sitting on your own on stage with just you and your thoughts and the audience. But no work needed to be done because Mike Bartlett wrote it. And so a few tweaks and changes and barely a few. And it's just very easy to inhabit. And I suppose, I don't know, I'm terrible at analysing acting, and I don't think anyone should ever analyse it from within, but when the writing's great, you just, I don't know, it just falls into place, doesn't it? And you don't worry about likability or any of that stuff. You just play the truth as it's written, and hopefully you bring your humanity to the projected humanity of the character, you know, the whatever was in Mike's mind. And yeah, it kind of, you know, you just sort of make it work. And it was just an incredibly honest bit of writing, I think. And I just felt that it was truthful, and it was a father having lost his daughter, and I suppose he was talking to himself, but he was doing a projected, he was imagining a conversation he was about to have with his daughter that he didn't think was going to turn up. And so it's full of all the self-deceit and all the kind of lies that we tell ourselves, and all the justifications and all the self-pitying and all the self-righteousness that human beings, you know, say to themselves when they're shaving. I say shaving, you know what I mean? There's that notion of, you've got to look at yourself as you're shaving in the mirror, and you tell yourself whatever you have to tell yourself to get through the day. And Mike he gets that, I think.
Yeah, of course. I feel like, you know, a lot has changed, you know, since 2020 when you did Snowflake, and I feel like the political landscape was definitely heightened over the last few years. Do you think it's become, you know, harder, you know, having, you know, political conversations, whether that's been, you know, with friends or family or at work?
No, I think, I mean, I don't want to get into anything political here, obviously, but I think, and certainly don't want to get into family stuff. I think that it's the old phrase, you know, the personal is political, and politics are personal, and it's our job as, I hate to use the word artists, but it's our job as actors, it's our job as playwrights, or whatever it is we do in this world, journalism, whatever whatever labels we ascribe to ourselves. But we can't attempt to live in a bubble, because we're storytellers, and our stories are set in a context, and our audience turn up with the day they've had, which is why, you know, you could play the same play in the same way 4 years apart, and it would be taken very differently. The illusions change, context change is, suddenly people have spent the last 4 weeks, for example, seeing some sort of brutalization. So a reference to some part of the world is going to trigger certain mental images. I mean, that's the beauty of live art. We're all held very delicately in this, whatever the context is, and it's why it's really good fun sometimes touring a show. You go around the world and suddenly the same show has completely different reactions and responses, yet some stuff is entirely universal and will always be universal. It's why Shakespeare is just such a laugh to do, because the universal bits just hit everybody in the same way. It's so satisfying. Yeah. Maybe that's the sign of great writing, is that it's never parochial. It always leans to the universal, and you as theatre makers don't have to spell out the politics. The politics resonate regardless of your intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. You've worked with some fantastic people that you've already name dropped, you know, from Elvis Costello to Rupert Goold to Mike Bartlett. I was really curious to know, you know, what was the experience like working with Madonna on Filth and Wisdom?
I better be careful here. She's a great artist. It was a wonderful experience. I'd say no more.
Okay. I feel like the theatre industry has been, you know, it's been going through a really interesting, very exciting and challenging time as well, of course. I was just wondering, you know, over the last 12 months, you know, have you seen any shows yourself recently that's particularly stood out to you?
I haven't seen much, I have to say, because I've been super busy and I've been away on work. But one thing that I really adored was forgive me, I can't remember. Zeldin's thing at the National, Confessions. I just thought it was brilliant and actually really helpful. I watched it when I was just starting to work on this, and you know, I adored its sort of lack of theatricality, and I adored the fact that it broke loads of rules, partly because it was following its own rule, which was that of a sort of private authenticity. This was theatre made out of a conversation that he had with his mother, and it was the confession of her life, or the revelation of her life, and it followed her truth, a theatricalized version of a glorified therapy session. And so it followed those rules, but because you realize those rules are truthful, you're very happy to go with them. You can go with long extended scenes. You can go with snapshots from a life, because you know somebody is in pursuit of truth. And that always sounds indulgent and wanky and stuff. Pursuit of truth. What does it mean? Well, you know it when you see it. When you're sat in the stalls and you watch, you know when something's authentic. You know when the endeavor is authentic. Even if it fails, it doesn't matter. You know it sort of succeeds on its own terms. And we all know what it's like to sit in the stalls and watch confection and watch the idea of authenticity, the ersatz truth. Oh, this is what truth sounds like. Yeah. Oh, this is what truth is like in musicals. Bollocks. We all know it's bollocks. And we can be entertained and love it and really lovely, sing along even. But we all really admire it when you go, ooh, again, it's wanky, but you go, oh, there's something the human condition is being polished here, and I'm seeing something I haven't seen before, and it's wonderful. And you can't over-egg it. You can't only do that. You need everything. But it's really, I'm grateful to sit in the audience and go, oh God, thank you. That's really brave. Brave because it's a bit boring. Boring can be really brave. And we're so scared of, we're sometimes really scared of boring. And I think it's worth pursuing sometimes, I think.
Of course, definitely. It's been so fascinating talking to you.
Talking of boring, I've bored you rigid.
No, honestly, it's been really interesting. Just as the last question, what do you hope people will take away with them when they come and see A Cold War?
I think they'll take away maybe some of the stuff I've just been talking about. I think it's not. I think it's. You're not going to be hopping down the street, skipping and singing the tunes, or you might. You might be running away. But I think you will have been part of something which resonates on a sort of certain frequency. And I think it's an unusual frequency. I mean, people, you might say it's dark or it's depressing or it's atmospheric, but I think it's sort of, what's it examining? It's examining love, dangerous, real, passionate, destructive, depressing love. That's the endeavor. And I think, in the curtain call, I see people crying and you go, okay, something happened to you, something resonated, and they might be sitting next to somebody that's just doing their Ocado list. But I mean, that's good theatre, isn't it? Somebody's crying and somebody else is not.
Yeah, it's definitely a terrific piece, and I'm so glad they've gotten to go and see it. And yeah, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Not at all. Thank you.